Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here I'm going to talk about Spine 630, Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski, 1968. Yes, again. I'm not going to talk about too much because I felt I already covered it the first go around with Repulsion, but I'll briefly reiterate. I know about that thing. I know that thing is often used against him in viewing his films, but I try not to let it do that. I try to separate the director from his actions, because there is a lot you can learn from Polanski, as certainly as far as filmmaking, and I try not to let certain actions get in the way of that. If that were the case, I should refuse to like most, if not all, artists, because when you really look down at the past, there's other things. I admire Picasso, even though I can also call him an asshole in some respects. So. I tried, and also in regards to that particular thing, the bottom line is that it should not matter it shouldn't matter what side you are on it, whether you want to come at him with torch and pitchforks, or you want to be able to shield him and say that, oh, he didn't do anything wrong. Regardless of what side you are on that, the bottom line is that needs to be resolved by the courts, and I'm talking about the actual courts, not the court of public opinion. And so, there, I've said it. Anyways, Rosemary's Baby. Another classic of psychological horror, and which is, you think, well, you already talked about Repulsion, but this is another demonstration of what Polanski is good at, and what he's really good at is bringing the right amount of tension and dread. And it's done in a very, very subtle way, where you have this veneer, this nice surface, but then as you get into it more, you start to see that there's other things going on, and it's done in a very, very subtle way. And Rosemary's Baby is perhaps the best example of this. It's very, very subtle. Now, this is another film where you could give a spoiler warning, although at this point it's the twist gets into it was his sled territory. But but I'm not going to focus too much on what it is. But I mean, you kind of know what the story is anyway. A young couple move into this apartment building, and they have a month. Well, they have very few. The prominent neighbors they do have, there's something a little bit odd about them, and then at some point Rosemary gets pregnant, and it just starts to gradually get stranger and stranger, and you probably already know. You either seen the film or you already know how it's going to be. So I'm not gonna get into that. It's there. If you know it's there, then fine. But I'm not going to talk about that. But what I am going to talk about is how it's subtle. It's something that you don't see as much, and especially in horror films. Everything seems to be about showing anything and everything, and it's usually done in a very stupid way. But here, it's all in the subtleties, and a lot of it is what you don't know is what makes, and that can be very horrifying in itself. In fact, I think that tends to be the best horror, is where you don't know where something is, or you don't have all the answers, where there's some ambiguities and things that are not fully explained, or even when it is explained, you're not really sure how to. It's more effective the less you know about something. And it's something that I feel that it's become a lost art, particularly in horror films. it's it's not to say that there isn't out there. And again, it's not a genre that I go to very readily. I know there are other people I know who are bigger horror film fanatics than I am, and so I trust that it's out there. But having said that, I still feel that compared to what often gets put out nowadays, it's not really subtle. And actually, come to think of it, I can imagine, what about Paranormal Activity? No, that's not subtle. That's just stupid. it's it was a flash in the pan kind of thing. It had good marketing behind it. Also came out through Paramount. But that's not what I mean. Here's what I mean. Everything is. I think what makes this work is that it's all from Rosemary's view, played wonderfully by Mia Farrow. It starts off. I mean, you're alone with her, so everything that she experiences or what she remembers, you're with her the whole way, and it starts off pretty normal and straightforward. You think, okay, I'm told that this. When you first see it, you're told that it's a horror film, but you're like, there's nothing really horror. Like, it's pretty normal. But then it's over the course of it, you start to find that something is stranger, and it's all in the subtleties. It's not. It's executed subtly. It's not. She suddenly transforms into anything grotesque, or it's not overdone. It's done in a very realistic manner, and that can also be very terrifying. Is when it's you have these things happening that are done in a realistic way, or it's still relatively normal, and so again, it's the whole thing is subtly objective, or subtly subjective, because it's all from her, and as she knows things or as she experiences things, you experience it along with it. Now, this is in a way a big contrast to Repulsion, where Repulsion also is very subjective, but at the same time, but the surreal elements come through more. It's very obvious that you're not only seeing that she's breaking down, but you also get some sense of the imagery that is in her head, and it's more it's comparatively over the top than compared to Rosemary's Baby. It's not to say that it doesn't have it has its big moments here and there. Her dream, for instance, is an example of this. But it's very few. But those moments are few and far between. Whereas Repulsion, and especially as she breaks down more and more, those images come out to the fore more and more. The thought process plays out more. But it's a case where it makes sense given the story. In the case of Repulsion, this is an exploration into one's mind. So it lends itself to more dreamlike or more surreal imagery. Whereas Rosemary's Baby, it's an occurrence that happens in the real world. So more or less, it's played with few exceptions. It's played more or less straight. But it's still very terrifying, and that's what makes it really work. It doesn't depend on heavy gore or heavy blood or any of those typical horror conventions. It's done in a very, and for the most part, a fairly realistic way. And it's all about the performances, and also in the camera work. Polanski is a director that loves using wide-angle lenses, and it does. It gives it. The way he uses it is that you typically with wide-angle lenses, it emphasizes the space in a room. You get a sense of the dimensions in a room. That's why That's why some directors like using it for rooms, so you get a sense of what's surrounding them. So it opens up. But Polanski is one of the few directors, and I would say Terry Gilliam does the same thing too, where he uses a wide angle lens to constrict, where it creates a feeling of confinement that gives you a feeling of similar to claustrophobia, or maybe not so much claustrophobia, because a phobia technically is a unexplained fear, but being confined is a fearful thing of itself, and it can be done for rational reasons in addition to having to be irrational. But the point is that you have something that's supposedly open space, but you have the feeling that you're being constrained, and it's very, very terrifying. And it also helps to give that sense of unease, that even though it's played more or less straight, and again, there are a lot of scenes where it just feels like it's a domestic affair. You think, oh, this is just a nice little couple, and it does sort of play out as a kind of domestic drama with some dark comedy put into it as well. But it's also, but you also know that there's something a little bit off, especially as little things start coming into play, strange unexplained events, and why did this happen all of a sudden? And it adds to the unease. It doesn't have to be overdone or over the top, but it's done in a very subtle and effective way. And I make it sound like it's all dry. It isn't. It's really hard to explain, but but I think, again, I think what it comes down to is that it's not overtly apparent. I think that's what makes it work. The things I think the things that need to be shown are shown well, and it's no more and no less. It has that right balance, and especially for horror. And that's why in the end I end up watching Polanski's films, and I try not to let that thing hold against him, because he made great films. Are there others? I mean, there's plenty of other directors that have also made great films, and he's not the only one. But certainly, in the horror realm, he's one of the greats, and in his particular way. There are other greats in the horror area as well, and in suspense and thriller and so on. So it's not just him, but he's you can learn some things from Polanski, especially when it comes to performing the combination of performances and camera work, and just kind of an overall feel and mood. I felt something similar with The Ghostwriter, for instance, and that's a more recent film that he did, where again it's played more or less straight, but it's about having that tension and dread that's ever there, and the things that are played out are played more subtly and more realistically. It doesn't feel like it has to go over the top and such. And again, this seems to be a theme with this small batch, is that it's all in the execution. And this production in particular is interesting, because the producer of this was William Castle, and he was known as a producer, but more as a producer of B-movie schlock. And in fact, when he gave the project to Paramount, and particularly Bob Evans, they said, okay, you can produce it, but please don't direct it, because this material is like way too good. You need a better director for this, I think there's somebody else that can really make this work. And for Bob Evans, it was Roman Polanski. And at that point, he had made Repulsion, he had made Cul-de-sac, and it's like, I think this is the right guy for it. And this ended up being the first film that he made in America. And and he's gone on to do quite a few as well. And but at any rate, so but again, it's the material. If you gave the material to somebody else, it would have been a completely different film, and maybe those details would have been brought out more to the fore, or that it would have been more apparent and obvious. But again, it's because of his direction that made it really work and made it really stand out. If it wasn't for that, then it certainly would have been a forgettable film. It would have been very much a flash in the pan affair. But even when you do know how the whole thing works, even before getting into it, and I definitely knew what it was before getting into it. I wasn't surprised. But what still makes it hold up is, again, in the way it's executed, in the way that it plays out, and it's done in this fairly realistic way, but it's still a bit off-centered. It's off-centered in a very subtle way. It's not done in an over-the-top manner, and that's what makes it really compelling and really interesting. And it still makes it very compelling and very interesting, even after now it's been 45 years since the film came out, and it still holds, and that's very impressive. If a film can do that, then you know you have something that's worth viewing. So I would say go see this if you haven't seen it. Obviously I think I try to watch this around Halloween time because that's it's a good time to watch horror films, and I have plenty of horror films to go through in order to satisfy that. So, and that was the reason why I got Rosemary's Baby, is because it came out, and I felt that, okay, this is another horror title that I should add to my shelf, and it would be a good viewing and so forth, and who knows. And so that's ultimately why I got it. So, but if you just go see it for what it is. It's a great film, and try not to let the other stuff get in the way of that. It's still another mark of a good film is even with all that other stuff, it can still hold and such. So, anyways, and that was Rosemary's Baby. And until next time, take care.